I'm really having a hard time finding a flattering angle today. Maybe that's just the person and not the angle. Eh. Let's talk about reading for ourselves. And let's talk about how we can get better at that. So, this is primarily going to be of interest to folks maybe that are starting out or who have been reading for a while but feel overwhelmed or struggling in general when it comes to reading for yourself. When I started reading, I thought that I really was going to read for myself exclusively. Like I had no ambition of reading for someone else. That just felt like something other people do. And I very, very, very quickly learned that it's hard as hell. Now, some people are going to disagree with me and say that it's not. You know what I mean? Some people seem to have a really easy time about it, and that's great. You know what I mean? Like, far be it from me. If you have an easy time reading for yourself, I think that I say bravo. This probably isn't going to interest you. And that, again, I mean, not everything's for everybody, right? But this is for the folks who, like me, have struggled. So, the first thing I'll say is that I think, if you haven't read Tower for Yourself by Mary Kay Crew, you should. That's a great place to start. And I think that she says some interesting things these days about working on that book. One of which was that when she started it, really reading for yourself wasn't a thing. Although I did hear her say, when I thought it was really funny, was that when she started working on that, one of the questions that she asked people was, should you read for yourself? And everyone said no. And do you read for yourself? And everyone sort of sheepishly said yeah. So there was a thing of like, you're not supposed to do it, but everyone did it. So in the years I've been reading, since my initial failed attempts to read for myself, I've discovered and identified, I think, some key things that can go a long way in terms of making readings harder when we read for ourselves and things that can make it easier. So the three areas that we're going to cover today, I'm going to sort of give you a high level example or just chat about what they are, and then I'll cover each of the three in the next couple videos. This may be two videos. I think two makes the most sense because the first one is kind of the longest, and then the other two are a little briefer. But we'll see how that goes. So the first one is questions and context, and I have a very missionary pitch when it comes to questions and context, and so I'll probably repeat some things that I've said in other videos, but I think that when it comes to reading for yourself, having context is key, and I think that for all readings, but I think for yourself, when reading for yourself in particular, particularly if you're starting out, big, big, big help. Part two is tenacity, and that's the word of the day because I have to tell you, recording this required a lot of tenacity. I have faced every obstacle in recording this video, including the fact that I somehow managed to crash my computer and spent the phone for about 2 hours with Apple Care, and then somehow managed to get off the phone with them, give up, and fix it myself. And I don't know how I did that. And then the final thing is checking yourself before you wreck yourself. And checking yourself happens throughout all three phases, including the check yourself phase, but I'll talk more about that. So those are the three. Those are the three areas that we're going to talk about. And they have kind of multiple parts as well, especially the questions and context one. But those are really key. And I think mastering, I hate that word, practicing and embodying and internalizing those three lessons can really, really go a long way if you struggle with reading for yourself. So let's start with part one, which is questions and context. And what I want to do, I'm trying to choose my words carefully because, again, I recognize that not everything is the same for everybody and people have different experiences. I am going to sort of draw on right now a reading technique that a lot of people find really effective, but that I also find can really frustrate a new reader or someone who's trying to read for themselves, by way of giving you an example of why question and context is important. So let's talk about the idea of the daily draw, right? So you are learning to read, and you will likely come across the advice that you do a daily draw. So you get up in the morning, you pick a card, and you come back at the end of the day and journal about it or revisit it. And why I think that can actually be a really frustrating, and it was a really frustrating experience for me when I started out, is because the sheer potential for every card is kind of huge. And I guess this is one of the reasons why people who prefer Lenormand or Kipper or those more terse, succinct oracle methods like them, because the key for us in essence is supposedly always the key. I've found that not to be true, even watching people, who are experts sometimes will say, well, the key, it means the key, but it means the key in this, whatever. I'm not going to get down that road. But you get up at the beginning of the day and you shuffle your deck and you pull a card and you get, what is this? You get the Queen of Cups, right? So, this light. There we go. There she is. So we get the Queen of Cups. This is the Eight Coins Tattoo Tarot. So you get out of bed, you sort of find some time, you quiet yourself, and you do your daily draw, and the Queen of Cups comes up. And the Queen of Cups can mean a lot of things. And I'm actually glad that it was a court card that came up, because the court cards can be even more difficult as a card for a daily draw, because does it represent you? Does it represent someone in your life? Does it represent an event? Does it represent someone new? Is it your boss? Is it your partner? Is it your friend? Is it your lover? Is it your kid? Excuse me. How do you know? You don't, and so where I think daily draws can become frustrating for a lot of folks over time is that you draw the card. Okay, what's my card for the day? It's the Queen of Cups. Go through the day. You may or may not think about it, and then you get to the end of the day and you're like, okay, my card, if you remember to do this, my card was the Queen of Cups. Like, where the hell did the Queen of Cups show up today? And then you frustrate yourself trying to look back on the Queen of Cups moment for the day. Now, suppose you said, when you did your daily draw, I'm trying to remember back to some of the brilliant things I did in the first version of this video that I lost. Suppose that you said, what am I supposed to manifest for the day? Now that's a little better, because it gives you something to play with. So Queen of Cups, be intuitive, be emotionally sensitive, care for your emotions, which is fine. I think that's a good generic example of what you can do with the Queen of Cups. And if you want to explore how to enact a card, I think that's a good thing. But I think the more specific we get, the better and easier the reading is. And the easier it is at the end of the day to go back and explore how that card manifested and what it means. And the reason why I think that is important is because a lot of people give up on reading who might be potentially good readers because they get frustrated with their inability to connect the dots sometimes, particularly when reading for themselves, particularly on a daily draw. The other thing is that it's just tough, to sort of think about all the potential ways that a Queen of Cups card could manifest during the day. You know what I mean? Is it speaking to that time where you didn't flip your lid in line at Starbucks? You know what I mean? Or is it something else? Is it the time that your boss let you leave early? You know what I mean? And maybe all of those are, and they're good examples. But if you're sort of saying, describe my day with the Queen of Cups, it's not easy to do. What should I manifest today? Fine. But how about, how do I deal with the conflict at work with Tim? How do I best communicate with my partner today? How do I care for my emotions when my kids start driving me nuts? Whatever the case is. The more specific you are, suddenly the more context the Queen of Cups has, and the easier it is to actually get a useful answer from her. So, if we're thinking about this in terms of how do I best communicate with my partner today, I have to nurture their feelings. So when I'm communicating with my partner in this case today, it's going to be important for me to be very aware and intuitive of their mood and their feelings, and really be more thoughtful about that, really be more careful, and just try to read them a little bit better, right? For example, suddenly I have a really specific connection to the Queen of Cups and who she represents and how. I've also taken the guesswork out of who she is, because the question I asked was, how do I best communicate with my partner? You know what I mean? So I don't have to worry about like who's the Queen of Cups. Is it my boss? Is it Tim? Is it John? Is it Tammy? Is it whoever? It's me today because of the question I asked. So that really, really goes a long way for me. Is having a specific question that will help you narrow down the potential meanings of the card, so that we don't get overwhelmed, so that we don't get confused, so we don't get frustrated. And so we actually have a little bit of an action plan at the beginning of the day. For example, if I'm asking about, how do I best engage or communicate with my partner today, and this always confuses me, and this is the card that I get, you know what I mean? Then and it looks like shit in this light, but it's such a it's a little better. You know what I mean? Then I get a much better sense of something that I'm actually doing, and I get an easier ability to go back and look at the end of the day and say, did I do this? How could I have done this better? So I think that's really good. You know what I mean? I think having a defined question is not a bad thing. You know what I mean? And again, it could be anything. Again, just to go back to the conflict with Tim question. So I say, how do I best engage with the conflict I'm having with Tim at work? And I pull a card and I get the Two of Swords. And so now I have a sense here of being very even tempered. You know what I mean? The Two of Swords, in essence, um, evening out, balancing out mood, mind. You know what I mean? Or I could say, I need to cut a bitch, but it gives me something to work with. That's just like I pull this card. It's my card of the day, and I need to choose between this and that. You know what I mean? Like it just gives me more to work with. So I think having a good question is is a really important thing when you're reading for yourself. Now, sometimes we don't have a specific question, and that's okay. Sometimes we want to do a reading for ourselves, and we just want to explore the meaning of the card. That's okay too. So sometimes it's not about the question, sometimes it's about the intent, and it's about knowing what the intent is. And again, I think this can be particularly effective with the daily draw as well. Sometimes it's not about what's going to happen in the meeting with Tim, or how do I communicate with my boss, or how do I practice self care today, or whatever the case is, all of which would be good questions for a daily draw. Sometimes it's, we do want to explore how a card manifests. And so I think that, we start with that intent. So we sit down and we shuffle the deck and we pick a card and we say, how will this card manifest? And in that case, I would actually carry a notebook with you and sort of write down every time you experience a manifestation of that card. I think that's a really good way to learn the cards, in fact, because those little moments are going to pop into your head as you read down the line, and that little notebook can be really good. I actually think tracking your daily draws is a good thing. I think it's back there somewhere, like right there. I think it's under a pile of books from when I moved, but Angelo Nazios's tarot tracker is a good way to do that. But it can be anything, and you track, here's the way the Two of Swords manifested today. I had to remain even keeled in that meeting with Tim. I had to choose between this class and that class when I was registering for school. I had to talk to my child about selecting their word choice carefully when they're among others. Whatever the case is, I think about how the Two of Swords manifests. So it doesn't need to be a question in specific, although it does help, and it's important to have some intent. But what that does is it gives you a box to color in, and it limits the possible meanings of the cards, so that you're not overwhelmed, so that it's not drawing from the deck and picking, a card with, oh gosh, what's a card that, like the Death card, you know what I mean, that has all of this esoteric stuff assigned to it. And does it mean this or that, or what's ending to, what I mean? It just becomes kind of crazy. If the question is, how do I work best with my boss who's been in a foul mood, and the Death card comes up, then I have context, then I have shading, I know the box I'm playing in, and it doesn't need to sort of force me to think of every potential thing that the Death card could mean. It means that I need to think about, and that's actually a really hard one. You know what I mean? It just off the top of my head, I need to care for this time of transition. I need to stay away. I need to think about the inevitability of this mood. You know what I mean? She will, and that death is inevitability. She's inevitably going to be in a bad mood. I need to prepare for it. I need to prepare to get cut by that scythe. Whatever. You know what I mean? So I'm going to gird my loins. I'm going to get yelled at. It's going to happen. It's going to piss me off. I better prepare now. Whatever. You know what I mean? So, but that gives me something to play with, and stay inside the lines of, so that I'm not trying to associate everything and figure out how the Death card is going to manifest during the day. And I think that's really, really important when you're starting. I think it's really important, particularly with the major arcana, which can be sort of like pow. And I think just even if you've been reading for a long time, it's good to have a bounding box. If everything's possible, everything's possible. That's great in some cases, but sometimes we want to limit possibilities so that we're not overwhelmed by them. So that's part one of dealing with questions. Part two is making sure that the question that we're asking is the one that we really mean to ask. Um, and what I mean by that isn't necessarily to make sure that we ask questions that we want the answer to. Like that's a pretty common tarot adage, and it's true. Like, don't ask anything you don't want the answer to. I think that that's totally fair. That's not what I mean in this case, though. What I mean in this case is, here's a bad habit that I have a lot. A lot of times when I'm reading for myself, it's because I've been prompted to by something happening at the office, and I'll like pull the cards. I'll shuffle the deck. You know what I mean? I'll say, "What's up with work? What's up with work?" So I do my shuffle. I ask, "What's up with work?" And then I pull the Queen of Pentacles, another court card, right? Let's do something that's not a court card, just for variety. The Ten of Wands, right? So let's just see that in this deck. So the Ten of Wands. And if I'm looking at a Rider-Waite-Smith system there, this kind of tells me exactly what's up with work, which is that I feel overburdened and exhausted, for example. So that's, is that the question I really mean to ask? Describe what's happening at work right now? Like, I know what's happening at work right now. I'm upset with it. Again, this is just example, but like, this gave me the answer I was looking for, which is what's up with work. This is what I know is going on. That's not what I want, though. I guess what I wanted at heart is like, how do I deal with what's happening at work? How do I reserve my energy through that? How do I not end up at the end of the day feeling this way, for example? So this is where we get into sort of the first part of check yourself, which is that when you decide on a question, that you spend a little time and say, is this the question I really want the answer to? Is this what I mean to ask? Is this what's going to get me what I'm looking for? Is this the most helpful version of this question? What's up with work describes a situation. Sometimes I want to know the result. So better than what's up with work is like, what's going to be the result of the meeting with Koji? Sometimes it's about handling a situation. How do I best prepare for this meeting with Giselle? Whatever the case is, you really think deeply about the question, and you ask the question that you really mean to ask. That's going to have the impact you're hoping for. That's going to get you what you want. And I think that's another place where a lot of us fall down, especially when reading for ourselves, and actually in reading for others. I'll touch on that in just a sec. That we don't necessarily ask the question we mean to ask. We'll ask a really general question, or we'll ask something that seems like it's similar to what we mean to ask, but it's not quite. And I really do believe that the cards answer the question that we asked. And so if I ask what's up with work and I get the Ten of Wands, it's giving me a description of work. Now, if I got the Ten of Wands in the context of how do I best handle this meeting with Koji, in that case, I have to look at the card differently. It describes a different situation, so it's answering the question in a different way. In that case, I need to sort of look at the way that I think about, just if that were real. So here's what I would do. I would say 10 is completion. It's the finishing of something. Wands is like fire, passion, work, right? So I would say the best way to handle this meeting with Koji is to stay in that meeting until we get done, until we get the resolution of this, that we need to get resolved, no matter how much conflict there might be, how much flare-up there might be, you know what I mean, for example. But the cards answer the question that we asked. And so I really do believe that strongly. And so asking the right question matters a lot. And so in full faith and honesty, I think that asking the question, coming up with the question, should take probably more time than a 1 or 3 card reading, to be honest. And I think this applies to reading for others as well, if they don't already have a question. If they come to you for a general reading or they don't know what to ask and you're working with them, I think it's good when you decide, like, okay, we want to know what's in your love life, what's the energy around why you can't seem to connect or stay interested in anybody for very long. And then we sort of say, okay, that's the question. Now, let's just check ourselves. Is that the question we mean to ask? Is that going to be the most helpful? So you can do that with another person too. I'm a big believer in not rephrasing a question for a client. If they ask me something, I try to answer it as well as I can. I really do believe that they know what to ask. I'm more likely to say to a friend, hey, come on, that's not what you want to know. Like, let's be straight here. But I also, this is where I differ from some readers too, because sometimes you do a spread and you'll realize like, oh, this is not really about that at all. It's about this other thing. I actually don't think that's the case. I think the cards always answer the question that was asked, which is why the question is so important. Now, other people, especially those who have more of a psychic bent than like I'm just a card reader. I'm not a psychic. I don't have any of that in me. What's the difference? I don't really know, except that I can't do it without the cards. You know what I mean? Um, and I don't get a feeling beyond that of like I see what's there and the cards answer the question that I asked and I won't see anything else. In my younger reading days, I actually used to do that. I would like get the Eight of Wands in a reading about a relationship and say, "Oh, this is about your novel," and they'd say, "That's not. I'm not writing a novel. I'm not a writer. I don't have that interest." No, no, no. That's your novel. No, for me as a reader, that's me being lazy. That's me projecting or trying to like skate through the fact that they asked about the relationship, the Eight of Wands came up. I have to make the Eight of Wands connect to the relationship, not make the client's question connect to the Eight of Wands. You know what I mean? My job as a reader is to interpret within the context. Now, that's how I read and that's how I feel about it. Some people have different things. They will say, another energy is pouring through this reading and you need to focus on your love life. In a larger spread, maybe I would see that. But by and large, I really do feel strongly that the cards pulled answer the question that was asked and only the question that was asked. And that's me, again, just disclaimer, but I do think that's important. And I found that when I tried to say, oh, you asked about this, but this reading is about that, the client's like, no, that's bullshit. Now that could be denial, it could be whatever, but I really, really have come down strongly at this point in my life on the cards drawn answer the question that was asked exclusively, and that's why the question's so important. So just to recap this sort of longer lesson one, the question or the intent of the reading to me when you're reading for yourself is paramount because it reduces the number of possibilities that the cards could have, the potential meanings. It makes it easier for you to limit and to identify the potential for it, and it makes it easier for you to revisit it later on and say, oh, that's what that meant, right, or I did that or I didn't do that. So it makes it easy for you to check in and say, how close was I? If the Queen of Cups represents how I should communicate with my partner, I can go back and look at the day and say, did I do that? No, I didn't really. You know what I mean? I reacted in a strong way when I should have nurtured, for example. So that's part one. And part two is making sure that the question or the intent is really the most helpful, that it's really what we mean to ask. That if we're asking what's up with work, we really mean that. We just want a general overview of what's going on at work. But that if that's not what's really helpful, if that's not what we're really asking, that we dig deeper and that we hunt for the question that really gets us the help we need. What's up with work-ish? How do I deal with the fact that I'm exhausted at the end of the day? That's better. How do I manage my stress during the day? That's better because it's specific. And so the cards then have fewer potential meanings. And then my other caveat, which is that the cards drawn answer the question that was asked. And I feel like I finally had that click moment with that thing. I think Camellia Elias wrote that somewhere, so I want to make sure I give credit to her, but I do believe that that's where it sort of said, yes, that's the thing that's true. All right, so that's part one, which is reading for yourself, which is about questions, context, and just giving yourself a bounding box, making sure that you limit the potential meanings for the cards so that you're not overwhelmed by them, and you're not looking back at your daily draw or whatever reading and saying, what the hell did that mean? Like, I didn't see the Queen of Cups in my day, So in part two, we're going to talk about tenacity and we're going to talk about checking yourself. So I'll see you there.